Hi everyone, let's take a look at this relevant cost analysis involving many situations. It's problem 11-19A, and let's start off by reading it. I know that you can see the screenshot of the problem in front of you, but not all the words are real clear. So this one involves relevant cost analysis in a variety of situations. Lucy and Pals Corporation has a single product called Pups. The company normally produces and sells 54,000 pups each year at a selling price of $20 per unit. Company's unit cost at this level activities are given below. Okay, so we see that to the left of my mouse, direct materials are $8, direct labor $350, variable manufacturing overhead $180, fixed manufacturing costs are $135,000 in total, and if we divide that by the 54,000 units, I think we'll come to $250 per unit. Variable selling $1.20, fixed selling expenses $2, again $108,000 in total, for a total cost per unit of $19. And then there's a number of questions relating to the production and sale of pups, and we look at each of these independent as we answer those. So let's look at number one, since you can see that on the screen. Assume that Lucy and Pals Corporation has sufficient capacity to produce 70,000 pups each year without any increase in fixed manufacturing overhead costs. The company could increase its sales by 20% above the present 54,000 units each year if it were willing to increase the fixed selling expenses by 40,000. Would that increased fixed selling expenses be justified? So let's give that first scenario a try, and we'll work that on another page here. Okay, well, what do we know? One thing we know is, let me just call this number one, because we'll keep track of where we're going. We know the selling price per unit was equal to $20, right? And then we can back off variable expenses per unit. And the variable expenses were equal to, let's slide over here and see if we can find them all. Materials is variable. Direct labor is variable. The variable manufacturing overhead is variable because it tells us. Variable selling, again, we find the variable work, so the word in there. So if we add those all up, we come up with equal to $8 plus the $3.50 plus the $1.80 and the $1.20. So our total variable cost is $14.50. What that tells us then is that we can come up with a contribution margin per unit that's equal to the 20 less the 14.50. Okay, that gets us to 5.50. Once we have that, we can start working on this problem. We can say the increased unit sales is going to be equal to 54,000 units, the current volume they're making, times 20%. Right? So that's 10,800 units. And let me format a block of these just so we don't have to form that as we go. Okay, then if we multiply that times the contribution margin, actually I'm not even going to put time, I'm just going to write in. Let's come up with the new contribution margin on the incremental sales. And how we would do that is we would take the 550 we've already calculated times the 10,008. So we come up with contribution margin, and that's on the incremental volume. I'll just abbreviate, okay? So we're up to 59,400, and that's in dollars and cents, right? Then we have to subtract out the fixed cost that they said we would have, and it's going to be fixed selling costs. And they said that that amount would be $40,000. So I'll subtract the $40,000 here, draw an underline, and let me just copy this. This was also a subtraction. See, E7 minus E8, and we'll turn that into, oh, that's fine, 19.4 looks perfect. And that gives us an answer. Now, since that's positive, this would be an incremental net operating income. Then the answer should be yes, the increase in fixed selling expense would be justified. Okay, now let's take a look at number two. We'll slide over here so we can see it. Okay, number 2 says, assume again that Lucy and Pals Corporation has sufficient capacity to produce 70,000 pups each year. A customer in a foreign market wants to purchase 10,000 pups. Import duty on the pups would be $1.50 per unit, and cost for permits and license comes to $5,000. The only selling cost that would be associated with this order would be $2.60 per unit shipping. Compute the per unit break-even price on this order. Okay, so we need to first calculate what the new variable expenses are, right? So our variable manufacturing costs per unit are equal to the $8 cost, right? Plus the $3.50, we've seen that before, isn't that the labor amount? Plus the $1.80 of variable overhead. Now, let's just confirm that that's the correct variable manufacturing overhead. And we just want to identify variable manufacturing overhead at this point. I've got $13.30. Let's slide back, take a look. Direct materials, labor, and variable. Yep, there's our manufacturing overhead. Okay, but now we have some additional variable costs. We've got the import duties per unit, so we need to add that into the mix. That's $1.50. There was also permits and licenses. And these truly are variable cost in light of the opportunity that faces us. So given that we could have this order, our cost will change, that makes it variable. Well, that equals $5,000, right? But if we wanted to turn it into a per unit basis, we have to take those permits and licenses and divide it by the order volume, which was 10,000 units. Okay, everyone with me there? So that comes to 50 cents permits and license, a variable cost. There also was a shipping costs involved on this one, and the shipping costs were equal to $2.60. Okay. I want to format. Let's format all of these this way so we can see it. $1.50, 50, $2.60, right? Then we just sum from above, and we come up with the break-even price per unit. And the reason that this works is because we took the lump sum amount of the permits and licenses and broke it down into the number of units it was creating, which was 10,000. So if we sold 10,000, we've exactly equaled what that break-even per unit would be, and it comes to $17.90. Now double underline that, and that takes care of number 2. Now let's look at number 3. I've hit the wrong button on my screen here. We'll slide over again, take a look at number 3. Number 3 says the company has 2,000 pups on hand that have some irregularities. They're therefore considered to be seconds. Due to the irregularities, it'll be impossible to sell those units at the normal price through its regular distribution channels. What unit cost is relevant for setting a minimum selling price? Okay, so you want to know what the relevant cost is for selling a minimum selling price. All right, and the answer to this one is probably different than how I would advise, and I've faced this decision in my working career. I would probably say just try to sell them for as much as you can get for them, right? We've already made them, so most of the costs are a sunk cost. But the way the textbook wants us to answer this, they want us to say that the relevant cost would be equal to the variable selling expense, because all the other costs are sunk. You've already incurred them. So really, when we talk about what incremental cost do we have in dealing with this, all the other costs of manufacturing are sunk. The only variable cost we have is that variable selling cost. And I think that amount is $1.20. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's that variable selling cost. That's the only cost we haven't incurred. Okay, so once we format that correctly, we can see the variable costs. The fixed expenses are irrelevant since they're not going to change regardless of what happens we've had here. You can think of those as being sunk as well. They're already out the door. And depending on how their regular units are sold, the variable expense of $1.20, and that may not even be relevant. For instance, if we just disposed of them through a liquidator without incurring the normal variable selling cost, the $1.20 may not even be relevant. So this is sort of a tough question. It's $1.20, and I'm probably going to put an apostrophe next to it. And I'm going to offer my advice, which would be sell them for as much as you can get. And that's sort of a short-term view. Obviously, you want to think about the strategy of your business and to make sure that they don't wind up in the hands of customers that would pay full price, even though they are second.